It says hide and seek. Are we really going to play that?
A young woman named Grace is rehearsing the wedding vow. She is going to marry a man from a wealthy family. Upon seeing his bride in her wedding dress for the first time, Alex was delighted by her beauty. Grace is worried because the groom's family does not love her. Alex said that they need time to get used to it, as their traditions accept long courtships. The newlyweds were interrupted by Daniel, who said it was time to go out to the guests. Grace can't believe that in half an hour she will become a member of the gaming dynasty to which Alex's wealthy family belongs. The time for the wedding ceremony has arrived. Tony tells his eldest son that Alex deserves better. They all don't like Grace, who doesn't fit into their aristocratic circles. Grace became even more nervous when she saw the hatred with which Helene, Alex's aunt, looked at her. Charity, Daniel's wife, is sure that Grace will never become one of them. Daniel agrees, as she has a soul. Becky, the brother's mother, spoke amicably to her daughter-in-law, saying that her husband's family also did not want to accept her at first, but then everything changed. The only thing that matters now is Alex's opinion. The groom and bride kissed at the altar to the applause and congratulations of the guests. Now they are husband and wife. After the formal part of the wedding ceremony, the newlyweds were finally alone with each other and prepared to indulge in passion. But suddenly Aunt Helene appeared in the room, who entered here through a secret entrance for the servants. Helene said they were all waiting for them downstairs. Alex explained to his wife that at midnight, she would have to play a game. This is such a ritual for accepting new family members. The game is chosen by drawing lots. Grace said she'd be down in 10 minutes. Shortly after, Tony asked his son if he was ready to do what he had to do if Grace drew that very card. Alex only replied that tomorrow he and his wife would disappear from their lives forever. Later, Grace told Becky that she grew up in foster families. That is why it is very important for her to become part of a real family. Becky found this confession very touching. Grace noticed that Alex was nervous. Finally they were joined by Emily, Alex and Daniel's sister, as well as her husband Fitch and their 2 sons. They were late for the wedding ceremony due to problems with their private plane. Butler Stevens announced that there were only 5 minutes left until midnight. Tony opened the door of the room, which is accessible only to family members, in front of Grace. Grace was stunned to see many collectibles related to the gaming industry. The family members sat down at the table. Tony explained that they honored their traditions. The Ladomas family's gaming business was one of the largest and most profitable in the country, but luck had nothing to do with it. It all started with a generous patron and a mysterious box. Victor, Tony's great-grandfather, was a poor sailor in the merchant fleet who dreamed of becoming rich like everyone else. During one of his voyages, he met a man named Mr. LaBelle who shared his passion for gambling. Mr. LaBelle was a wealthy man who offered Victor a bet. If he could solve a riddle of the box before arriving at the port of destination, Mr. LaBelle would finance any venture of his. Victor managed to solve the puzzle. Ever since then, when the Ladomas family introduces a new member, they put a blank playing card in the box. Mr. LaBelle himself would decide what game they would play. Grace pulled the card out of the box that read hide and seek. She found it amusing, but the others did not. Tony explained the rules. They would count to 100 while Grace hid. During this time, the surveillance cameras throughout the house would be turned off, as if it were the 19th century. If they did not find Grace before sunrise, she would win. The girl ran off to hide, unaware that Tony was handing out 19th century weapons to his family members. Grace hid in the kitchen elevator. Alex was depressed, realizing that he would lose his beloved tonight. Becky asked Charity to keep an eye on Alex so that he would not run away or help his wife. While Grace continued to sit in the kitchen elevator, Alex used the secret corridor for the servants to find her. Charity noticed his disappearance too late. Eventually, Grace grew tired of sitting in one place and decided to come out. Meanwhile, the nanny who was watching Emily's children had dozed off and realized that Georgie had gone missing. She went to look for him. Alex sneaked up on Grace from behind, scaring her. He took his wife to the room and ordered her to bend down. They both hid behind the bed so that the nanny wouldn't notice them. Suddenly a shot rang out. Grace was horrified to see that Emily took Clara's life. But the bride was even more shocked when she heard that she was supposed to be in Clara's place. Tony had told his daughter that for the ritual, the bride needed to be alive, so she should be more careful next time. When the family left the room, Alex admitted to the wife that his family would hunt her until dawn. They believed that if they didn't sacrifice before morning, Mr. LaBelle would curse them. Alex instructed Grace to put on sneakers and go to the kitchen, and then to the main entrance. Meanwhile, he planned to sneak into the security room to unlock all the doors in the house. Trying to calm down, Grace headed for the exit. To avoid tripping on her dress, she tore it. But Grace mistakenly went out the wrong door and was trapped.
Found her.
The members of the Ladomas family prepared to rush after her. Emily began shooting but missed again. In a panic, Grace hid in one of the rooms. Suddenly Daniel came in looking for a bottle. He felt sorry for Grace, but he knew she couldn't be saved. It was true what everyone say, the rich have their own quirks. Daniel gave Grace a few seconds head start. After counting to 3, he called everyone. When the family members rushed in, Grace wasn't here already. They also found out that Alex had escaped. Emily was upset about losing her gun, so her husband kindly offered her his crossbow. However, when she took it, she accidentally fired a shot that hit one of the maids who had run into the room. Becky suggested using the surveillance cameras, but Helene thought it was disrespectful to tradition. However, Tony said that times are changing, and some things are outdated, like wearing masks. In one of the rooms, Grace found a vintage shotgun. When she saw herself in the mirror, she was horrified. Meanwhile, Alex had managed to sneak into the security room. Realizing that the door was still locked, Grace was about to shoot, but suddenly there was a whistle. Grace quickly hid when Stevenson entered the room, putting the kettle on the stove. Alex turned on the cameras. Tony and Daniel noticed it almost immediately. Alex couldn't unlock the locks in any way. Grace was hiding in the kitchen from Stevenson the whole time. Finally Alex did it. Grace pointed the gun at Stevenson, ordering him to move away from the door. The butler refused to obey her, so Grace pulled the trigger. It turned out that the shotgun was a dummy. Tony demanded that the son open the door. He had already messed up the security system before his father and brother could sneak into the room. A fight ensued between Tony and his son. Alex shouted to the father that he wouldn't let anyone harm Grace. Daniel urged the brother not to do anything stupid. Taking advantage of Alex's distraction, Tony knocked him out. Grace was about to hide in the kitchen elevator again, but found a frightened girl there who turned out to be a dancer. Realizing that the family was looking for Grace, the girl began calling them. The dancer accidentally pressed the button, activating the kitchen elevator. By the time Stevenson came, Grace had already escaped. The butler reported what had happened to Tony. They don't understand how Grace manages to easily take them out of the game. Becky called for everyone to calm down, as there wasn't much time left until dawn. Helene told her brother that Alex had lost his way. Once Helene also lost her beloved during hide and seek, but now she regrets not having participated. Grace overheard this conversation while hiding on the balcony. She took a long time to adjust herself before she jumped. Fitch, who had read about deals with the evil force on the internet, didn't notice her landing. Upon being set free, Grace headed towards the gate, but upon seeing someone with a flashlight, she ran to the barn and hid. It turned out to be one of Emily's sons. Grace thought that Georgie was also very scared, but then he suddenly shot. Despite her injury, Grace knocked him out. She was frightened by a goat. Tripping, Grace fell into the well. Clutching the injured arm to her chest, Grace began to climb up the rickety wooden stairs. Suddenly the ladder collapsed and Grace cut herself on a nail. Despite everything, she managed to climb out of the well and bandaged her wound. Later, Charity saw Grace running out of the barn, and informed Stevenson and the others. Screaming in despair, Grace realized that one of her pursuers was nearby. She hid in the woods while Stevenson searched for her in his car. Tony is afraid that if they don't bring a sacrifice to Mr. LaBelle before dawn, it's the end for all of them. Tony also wonders why Victor couldn't negotiate on different terms. Realizing that madness is happening around them, Fitch suggests that Charity run away, but she's not going to back down. While Alex tried to free himself from the handcuffs, Stevenson hunted for Grace. Emily and Daniel were cleaning up the tracks of crime. The last time they played hide and seek when Daniel and Alex were children. Seeing her son in the barn, Emily hugged him and told how proud she was of him. Meanwhile, Grace ran away from the butler, but he caught her and grabbed. However, Grace was not going to give up easily. A fight broke out between them, during which Grace knocked out Stevenson and stole his car. The first thing she contacted the manufacturer of the elite car and asked to call the police. Realizing that the car was stolen, the operator was forced to turn off the engine, as this was the company's policy. Grace didn't have time to get out of the car because Stevenson shot her with a dart with soporific, wishing her sweet dreams. The butler called the Ladomas family on video communication, informing them of the good news. He turned up the music loudly, having no idea that Grace was awake. Tony shouted for Stevenson to turn around, but the butler couldn't hear anything because of the music. Grace knocked him out, and the car crashed into a tree. The Ladomas family missed their victim once again. Despite the harsh collision, Grace survived, but she was almost immediately found by Daniel, who was about to run away. Grace begged Daniel to let her go, as Alex would never forgive him if anything happened to her. However, Daniel said he couldn't put his family's life in danger. He knocked out Grace, knowing full well that the father was watching them the whole time. Alex, who was still handcuffed, was approached by his mother who told him they caught Grace. Becky admitted she didn't want to do it, but they had to protect the family. It was their duty. Alex said it was all nonsense, there really was no curse. However, his mother's words gave him doubts. Later, Becky told her grandchildren that their family had a special friend, Mr. LaBelle, who gave them everything they could dream of. But sometimes they had to give Mr. LaBelle something in return. The family began to prepare for the ritual. When Grace came to, she realized she was trapped. Tony read the text of the ritual in Latin. Everyone in the family drank from the cup. Tony took a knife, preparing to renew their vow. But he didn't have time to do anything because he and everyone else felt sick. It turned out that Daniel had added poison to the goblet to save Grace. Meanwhile, Alex managed to free himself from the handcuffs. Daniel and Grace were planning to escape, but they were stopped by Charity, who had a gun in her hand. Thinking the husband didn't care about her, Charity fired a shot. Without hesitation, Grace attacked her and neutralized. Daniel's last word was run. Tony also tried to stop the bride from escaping, but she knocked him out with a vintage lantern. A fire broke out. Seeing his brother on the floor who could no longer be helped, Alex couldn't believe that Daniel was no longer with him. Becky couldn't let her family get hurt, so she attacked Grace. Becky paid for it with her life. Alex witnessed this, and after asking for forgiveness from his beloved, embraced her. Grace immediately sensed that something was wrong. The husband grabbed her, intending to complete the ritual. The sun was about to rise, so they didn't have much time. A fire was raging stronger and stronger in the house. The family gathered around the sacrificial table again. However, Grace managed to break free. She wouldn't let anyone come near her. The sun rose. The Ladomas family was horrified, but for several minutes nothing happened. Everyone was beginning to think there was no curse, when suddenly the gramophone turned on by itself. Mr. LaBelle began to take family members to the hell one by one. Grace burst into hysterical laughter, returned the engagement ring to Alex, and said they were getting divorced. Mr. LaBelle took him last. Seeing the silhouette of Mr. LaBelle in the chair, Grace left the house, sat on the porch, and lit a cigarette. The rescuers arrived. When a man asked Grace who did this to her, she answered that it was her relatives. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.